Oh, that was color-colored glasses. We're taking off those glasses, and we're going to talk offense with our scoring explosion segment. And Honky, we had 43 points last game out. I don't know what we're expecting against Illinois, but we may need to establish a running game this time around. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the tweets of the week that I'm using for scoring explosion. Here is a couple of photos of pick six previews. He did a shot of the Philadelphia Eagles getting a first down, and they did this a number of times. They basically got almost into like a victory formation, like goal line, quarterback under center, and they just plowed ahead and got a yard. And he said the Big Ten likes this, thumbs up. And then next to that is a tweet that I sent out, and it was a photo of this is Michigan against Penn State, and it was from above, and they have 3 tight ends on the line, 8 guys along the line, and it's just Big Ten football summed up in one play, and just the formation under center, and this is how they went out and they get a yard. That's Big Ten football. Nebraska is the absolute opposite of that right now. We are not Big Ten football in the sense of we don't really even make an effort much to run the ball anymore now. And I've said that from the first week against Northwestern. That's not a recipe for success, and I still don't think it's a recipe for success, despite having a lot of passing yards and even scoring some points, but a lot of passing yards to Palmer, which I'm happy to see. I think Palmer's done phenomenal, but we have to find a way to get a running game if we're going to have any success this week against Illinois or any of those other 4 games.
Yeah, that's hard to argue, right, Boomer? I mean, the past happiness of Whipple was something that we talked about in the off season, and it has played itself out.
Yeah, it's definitely manifested itself. I mean, we've all been recipients of the honky text when it's 4th and 1 and we're in the shotgun and throw a pass, and that doesn't seem to be a grand recipe for success in the Big Ten, and it we knew that's probably likely, and we were going to get, and we certainly have got it, and it is been kind of tough to see just the running back struggles. I mean, Grant had such a good start to the season. Yeah, and granted that wasn't against Big Ten type defenses and lines, but it's really just struggled these last couple of weeks to get anything consistent going with that. That's been really kind of disappointing.
So Rob, with the bye week, do you hold out any hope that Mickey actually kind of told Whip like, hey, let's rediscover some of those lost pages in the playbook from the Scott Frost era that worked relatively well in kind of weeks 2 and 3, and maybe get Anthony Grant untracked?
So I'm going to ask a quick question just because during the week.
You're going to answer my question with a question.
Well, just real quick because it'll help me. But because during the bye week, I kind of took a bye week myself too, and I stepped away from everything. How are we looking on the injury front on the offensive line? Are some of our guys coming back this week? Because I feel like the most success that we had in the running game, like in the Indiana, we were going like 7 deep or 7 or 8 deep on the offensive line or something like that. I think during that week. Am I wrong, Honky? And it felt like, remember at the end of the game, like we were really feeding Grant a lot and he closed it out. But it's going to be tough. I mean, I hope he makes some adjustments. I do. And it's ironic because I was like, oh, wow, Whipple, he's going to have a great passing game. We've got the wide receivers to do it. We got the guy recruiting the wide receivers to do it, like with Mickey. But now I'm just like, okay, I didn't expect him. I really didn't expect him to just not run the ball at all. Not at all. And I would like to see a run game. I sure hope they insert a run game, especially against Illinois, because you're going to have to be balanced. Their defensive backs are some of the best in the Big Ten. So,
yeah, I'd like to see, we mentioned like that we didn't know that we'd get this, or we thought that we would get this out of Whipple. I didn't think we'd get this because I just assumed we'd have the counterbalance of Whipple and Frost for, up until at least if anything was going to happen where you're firing somebody, it's going to happen in November, right? So I wouldn't have expected that yet at this point. The way that it's turned out, now that it's, this is officially Whipple's offense. I mean, we're throwing the ball like it's Whipple's offense. And, we talked about complementary football a little bit earlier. Complementary football is that on defense, we have struggled on defense. And just like running the ball 20 times or 23 times and throwing it 31 times, whatever it was, that's not a recipe for success. Well, giving up 101 plays to the other team isn't a recipe for success either. And that's what Purdue did. And, I want to highlight a very specific moment. This is a situational moment of the Purdue game, is that with 5.5 minutes left in the first half, they score a touchdown. They're up 17-10 on us. They kick the ball off to us. And with the group that I'm sitting with, I don't care at that point about scoring. Scoring is not the most important thing to me at that very moment. What's important is that we have 5.5 minutes left in the first half. We need to get into half down 7 at worst and take up 5.5 minutes. Don't put the defense back on the field. Play complementary football. That means instead of saying we need to get a touchdown, what we need to get is 3.5 yards. If you get 3.5 yards and you do it 3 times, you get a first down. If you get 2 first downs, maybe 3 tops, you've just taken 5.5 minutes off the clock. This is essentially what Purdue did to us at the end of the game when they got the ball with 6 minutes. They just took enough time off the clock and ran it out. We needed to do that at the end. Instead, we started to get pass happy. We throw a bad interception. I'm not even going to blame Whipple. There was a really bad throw by Casey, and he's heard enough of that now, so I'm not going to pile on it anymore. But it was a bad interception on the first play, I think it was. So right away, we give them an extra possession. Our defense is back there on the field. They score a touchdown. Now we're down 2 touchdowns. They get the ball. We get the ball back. We go 3 and out. Boom, boom, boom. And we're punting to them, and they get the ball again. Another possession. We actually held them. They get a field goal with enough time for us to go right down the field on them, of all things, running the ball with a QB snap or sneak and a QB scramble and a draw. And then we kick a field goal. And out of all that effort, we end up going into half down 2 touchdowns, 27-13 instead of it being 17-10. That's not complementary football because we're going to get the ball first in the second half. So somewhere along the line, we have to, it's a game management thing too, of like, we have to understand the situation where we're at, and being able to run the football does nothing more than just, if we can just run some clock there, that's important. But we're still kind of in a mode where we're getting up to the line quick. And sometimes we're running speed offenses in tempo, and it's like, man, we need to slow things down.
Yeah. I mean, you've laid out a really good scenario there of why we should be doing something a little bit different, especially with some of the limitations we may have. And 3.5 yards a pop doesn't sound impossible to get, at least for a couple. I don't know if you dream out the whole 5 minutes there, but it would have made things more difficult. Mm-hmm. And there's other ways to do that, right, Boomer? I mean, we should be able to try to run the ball, be more creative, but there could be a more controlled passing game in that situation if Whipple insists to throw the ball, where maybe you can throw a little shorter instead of trying to YOLO bomb it every single time.
Well, if they're going to leave Palmer uncovered, you might as well keep doing that. But
maybe that was a thought process.
Yeah. But I guess that is going to raise a question. Now, do you think it's Whipple just doesn't want to do this, or do you think he thinks we just can't do it very well, and he doesn't really have a choice? I don't know. What do you guys think on that? I mean,
No.
And then I guess the next question, then why isn't Mickey saying, "Hey, do this"? I mean,
that's one of the reasons. It's something I'm actually hoping for to come out of the bye week, to be honest with you. It really is. I don't know how realistic that is, but it's something I'm hoping for. I want to show this video here because this is something somebody mentioned this. This is I'm going to put this on loop here, and we won't do a full breakdown of this play, but this is ends up being the scramble that Casey goes up and gets 30 some yards here at the end of the second quarter. But what you really want to focus on, it's going to start over here again. Focus on the 2 defensive ends. These guys, the 2 defensive ends, are coming so hard. I mean, if you ever want to hear about pinning your ears back, these guys couldn't care less about any run game or anything, and they both beat our tackles, right? To the extent that it looks so bad, it's like, wow, what is wrong with our tackles? They're playing so badly. I look at this a little differently. What are we doing offensively that is just flat out giving it away what we're doing? I mean, that they're coming so hard. They don't care about anything other than getting as deep as they can in the backfield and getting to the quarterback. Now, Rob has made the statement a number of times that Whipple's offense is all about taking what the defense gives you. What Casey does here, and I don't do the entire play here, but if he would keep running, it goes for about 30 yards. That's what the defense is giving us a lot of times right now. Step up. I was frustrated against Oklahoma. There were plays where he could step up, and he wouldn't step up into the pocket and run. The play that preceded this was the Ramir Johnson draw. Holy smokes. That thing, I mean, there's times where the defense is just begging to be ran right up the gut on us, and they're coming so hard. So yes, did both of our tackles whiff here? Did both of our tackles not make the block? Absolutely, but it is all the harder when the defense is coming as absolutely hard as they are. I mean, they are pinned their ears back because they have no concern, no worries whatsoever about a run game. And we've got to be able to counter that. And and there's a lot of things that can help give a tell here. You know, Dave, you and I were talking this weekend,
Right.
And I focused, all I did was take Turner Corcoran, and I had mentioned it a couple weeks on Twitter, a couple weeks ago. There was a 3-play series against Rutgers where he had his hand in the turf, a 3-point stance for 2 straight plays, and then he got in a 2-point stance. And it just looked weird to me for a second. Like, why are we lining up in different stances? And it was a run, pass. And I kind of thought, I'm going to wait a game or two, but I think I'm just going to chart every play he does and just see what happens. And this was the game I did it. And he did 31 plays in a 2-point stance. So standing up, a 2-point stance. He did 22 plays in a 3-point stance, hand in the turf, kind of a more traditional run blocking alignment, so to speak. Out of those 31 2-point stances, we threw it 28 times. We ran it 3. When he lined up in a 3-point stance 22 times, we ran it 15 times and only had 7 passes. If I'm a defender and I look at that, I mean, if I'm just looking, oh, he's standing up. I mean, I'm all of a sudden, if nothing else, I'm pinning my ears back a little bit more. I'm going to attack because it looks like you're going to be in a pass set. And in fact, I said that they had 28 passes out of that. Technically, actually, they only had 27 passes because one of but one of them that they called is Casey ending up scrambling up the middle. Right. So, hey, guys standing up in a 2-point stance, we're going to come as hard as we can. And if we're not willing to take what they give us, which is right behind them, they're not playing containment. They're not playing any of that. Ramir Johnson didn't get touched for 17 yards. Do that enough times. Do a couple of draws if they're coming that hard. Casey, you've got to be willing to run that ball up the gut. You do that a couple of times, and you know what you'll start to see? Them, they can't rush that hard anymore. They have to pull off. Now, if they pull off, the likelihood of them running around our offensive tackles and making them look so silly probably isn't going to be as good either if they can't just pin their ears back and go. So it's a two-way street there. I come off as a defender of the O-line, and look, they've had their problems. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's not that, but it's just you've got to be able to do both. Right now, it's never going to be a recipe for success for us to be running the ball 35% of the game and throwing it 65%.
Whipple's been a coach for 40 years. He's forgotten more football than most people have ever learned, right? I mean,
every one of these coaches
is what you've just described makes total sense. And it's frustrating that, I mean, that's pretty basic stuff there, right? I mean, like when you get too predictable, the defense is going to take advantage of that. So we're going to see if they make some changes with this bye week. Rob?
Well, it was just funny because it was driving me crazy because that whole whites and the knuckles thing was like, I'm like, God, where have I heard? Like, I've heard it before, but I was trying to think it was like a pop culture reference. It was that movie Invincible with Marky Mark or whatever when he's in that, right? And he's the guy.
Oh, yeah,
and there's literally a point where like the lineman pulls him over and he's like yelling, he's like, see my knuckles? See my knuckles? When they're white, I'm doing this. When they're this, I'm doing this. And then of course the game comes and he gets past some blitzes and makes a sack or whatever. And I'm like, God, it is so obvious that they're even just sticking it out there for everybody to see in like a Disney movie of all things. Right? Like,
well, Dave, I had mentioned to you that, I sent that tweet out like 2 weeks ago, and I almost felt bad doing it because I'm like, not because I felt like I was finding something. My goodness, these coaches that have all forgotten way more than I ever know. They know this. I'm not giving away any secrets here, but I almost felt bad tweeting it out because look, I coach, but I did it. A couple decades ago, I was coaching. I'm old school. I don't know what all these young whippersnappers are doing today. And so who am I to say that, a guy shouldn't go from 2 to 3 point stances? But I just kind of asked the question on Twitter a couple weeks ago based off of 3 plays. I'm like, is this a tell? Maybe I'm a dinosaur, but is this a tell?
I'm a caveman.
I'm just a caveman. I'm just a podcaster, right? Rob Zaska responded to it, and his response was, "Hell yeah, it's a tell." And I've got a good buddy of mine from the fraternity days. He's been an offensive line coach for over 2 decades in high schools in California and on the East Coast. And I was texting with him about it, and his response, he goes, "I hate the 2-point stance. That's number one." But he goes, "I don't tell a player that he can't do it, but what I do tell him is whatever you're going to do, you've got to stick with it on every play. Then you're not going to be down one, up one, down one, up one. If you're going to do 2-point stance, you're going to do that for every single play." And so that's an offensive line coach telling me that. Rob Zaska says it's a tell. And then Adam Carricker started responding to him about how stupid offensive linemen were. And then that was a funny little tweet back and forth. But it's one of those things where it's hard enough. It's hard enough in football to get the X's and O's right. If the defense knows or thinks they know what you're doing. I mean, Dave, you guys are going to do the bet cast before we're done, and you'll talk about if you can win 60% or 55% of your bets. I mean, there's certain percentages where that's good. If you feel like on 70% of the time defensively, you feel like you can almost call the shot, like I know what they're going to do, and I can go that much harder. I'm going to take that much more of a risk because I think the reward's going to be there. I'm going to get to the quarterback because I think he's going to be drop back and throwing. That's a problem. And if 31 times you're in a 2-point stance and 28 of them you're throwing,
Yeah. Hey, Honky, can you have some fun with this just to kind of wrap it up? Can you bring the video back up?
Sure.
So we're seeing these Purdue defensive ends come at Lutovsky and Corcoran, and they get to Casey, and I'm still trying to figure out how in the heck did these guys not tackle him? They literally
ran into each other.
Yeah, they ran into each other, thankfully. Yeah.
I mean, the first guy, how does he not? It doesn't look like Casey even gets touched somehow.
Momentum, Dave. It's momentum.
I mean,
they couldn't believe that they both had an opportunity. I think they went for the high five instead of the sack.
I know.
That's what that looked like.
And watching this too, I mean, I don't want to come down hard on Casey here either. The guy's been beat up, and there's been times where guys have absolutely whiffed right there. The right tackle gets swam. I mean, so there's poor technique in cases too. I'm just holistically, it's my thing that I did a couple of weeks ago with how do we just make things simpler sometimes? Sometimes simpler is having more balance might make them not be so aggressive off the line. How you align, how you do your alignments, simplifying blocking schemes. There's a lot of things you can do to just make things simpler. And right now I would get things about as simple as you can, but it does at the end of the day, the discussion we had with our buddy Jack about, well, if you're throwing the ball and that's how you're scoring, you need to throw it to score. I'll say the same thing with 5.5 minutes left in the first half. We didn't need to score right then. What we needed to do was get into halftime down 7 points. That was more important than anything. And being aggressive ended up getting us down 2 touchdowns going into half instead of 1. So that's the complementary football. That's playing smart. It's running clock when you need to run clock. And running the football is not going to be a bad thing in this conference. Especially, we haven't even gotten into bad weather yet.
Yep, it's true.
I will say this. I just want all Redcasters to know Honky works on campus. So if you see him walking around, he is not a candidate for the head coaching job. I just want everyone to know that.
No.
Right
Well,
now.
if Travis hiring internally, he might be.